The Ice Age was a theatre of survival, where nature played the lead role and humans were fragile actors clinging to existence. The air itself could kill you, searing your lungs with every frozen breath, while the endless white wasteland stretched so far it felt like the world itself had died. A wrong turn in this frozen labyrinth meant starvation. A single night without fire meant never waking again. Food was not a luxury. It was hunted, fought over, and bled for. Fire was not warmth. It was life itself. And yet the greatest danger was not always the cold or the beasts that prowled the shadows. No, there was something more subtle, more insidious, that spelled doom for the careless. I won't reveal that just yet. Stay with me, because that truth is coming. Every storm could erase you from history. Every sound in the dark could be a predator stalking. Mammoths thundered across plains, saber-toothed cats lurked in ambush, and towering cave bears claimed dominion over the scarce shelters humans desperately needed. But the harshest lesson was this: survival did not forgive mistakes. A single misstep on the ice, a single night of poor judgment, and the Ice Age would claim another soul without remorse. This was not a world of second chances. It was a world where the line between life and death was razor thin, and one mistake, one single mistake, was the difference between enduring another dawn or vanishing forever. In the frozen silence of the Ice Age, survival hinged on two things: fire and flesh. And without either, humanity was nothing more than a fleeting shadow against the endless tundra. The cold was not just weather, it was an executioner, creeping into bones, numbing thought, slowing blood until it stopped altogether. And so, fire became more than light. It was a fragile fortress against extinction, a trembling flame that marked the thin boundary between life and death. But keeping that flame alive was a battle of its own, for wood was scarce on icy plains, and storms could snuff out weeks of effort in seconds. Those who lost their fire rarely lasted the night. I could tell you about one tribe that made the fatal mistake of trusting their embers to survive the storm. But that story, I'll hold for later. Fire gave humans courage, but courage alone couldn't feed a starving stomach, and so came the hunt, the endless pursuit of flesh. Giant beasts roamed these lands: woolly mammoths, armored rhinoceroses, musk oxen with horns sharp enough to pierce bone. To take them down required more than bravery. It required cunning, cooperation, and the ability to risk everything. Because one misstep meant you weren't the hunter anymore. You were prey. Spears tipped with stone shattered against thick hides, and many hunters never returned. The scream of a wounded mammoth could echo across valleys, summoning predators from miles away, and what followed was chaos. Blood on ice, men crushed under hooves, saber-tooths circling the scent of weakness. Yet the reward was salvation. Meat to feed the tribe, hide for clothing, bone for tools, and fat to fuel the very fires that kept death at bay. Without the hunt, there was no fire, and without fire, there was no tomorrow. But here's the darker truth. Sometimes it wasn't the beasts or the blizzards that killed. It was the humans themselves. Starvation could twist loyalty into betrayal, and history whispers of desperate nights where firelight flickered not over mammoth meat, but over flesh far more familiar. I won't reveal the full detail of that horror just yet. Stay tuned, because the Ice Age had rules, and one of them was simple. In a world this merciless, even trust could freeze and shatter. For now, remember this. The first weapons of survival were fire and flesh, and one mistake with either sealed a fate colder than the ice itself. The Ice Age was never mankind's dominion. It was a vast, frozen empire ruled by predators whose presence turned every step into a gamble with death. Beyond the weak circle of light cast by a fire, beyond the safety of stone tools and sharpened spears, there were hunters that had perfected the craft of killing across countless generations. And to them, humans were nothing more than fragile intruders trespassing in their domain. The saber-toothed cat, with its terrifying curved fangs, could drive ivory blades deep into the throat of a mammoth and crush its breath in seconds. So imagine the fate of an unarmed human crossing its path. Its silence was its greatest weapon, crouching low in snow or grass, waiting for hours without motion. And when the attack came, there was no time to scream, no time to react, only the thud of a body collapsing into the snow. But the saber-tooth was not alone. The cave lion, far heavier and more disciplined than any lion alive today, hunted in groups, surrounding prey with military precision, tearing apart flesh with claws that could rip open even thick Ice Age hides. When they roared together, it was like the earth itself growled, and humans learned quickly that to hear those roars at night was to know their hours were numbered. Yet even the deep caves offered no sanctuary, because the cave bear, a beast of enormous size and raw power, considered those stone chambers its throne. A single swipe of its paw could shatter bone, and desperate tribes who entered its lair for shelter often never walked out again. And still, these predators had a quality more frightening than muscle or tooth. They had patience. Ice Age hunters could stalk the edges of firelight for entire nights, their glowing eyes fixed on the flicker of flames, waiting for a guard to nod off, for voices to fade, for hunger to distract. Archaeological sites tell us of camps where fires still smouldered, tools remained untouched, and belongings were neatly scattered, yet not a single human survived. Only dark trails of blood in the snow leading outward into silence. What happened to those people? Some stories are too gruesome to tell now, but later I'll reveal how these disappearances became the stuff of whispered legend. And here lies the twist that changes everything. Humans were not only victims. When the cold grew harsher, when hunger hollowed their stomachs and fear turned to madness, tribes became predators of each other. Spears meant for hunting mammoth turned against human flesh. Raids on rival camps became the difference between starvation and survival. I'll save the most shocking betrayals for later, but believe this: no saber-tooth was ever as merciless as a starving man staring at another man's fire. And still, even in their savagery, humans were never the apex. They were survivors borrowing borrowed time, trespassers in a land where true masters prowled unseen. Every night was a test of nerves, every rustle in the dark a choice between holding your breath or running. And one mistake, just one careless step, was all it took for the Ice Age to erase you without a sound. The predators of the Ice Age had claws, fangs, and roars that shook the frozen plains, but the deadliest killer of them all was silent, invisible, and relentless. It was the cold itself, a force that never rested, never weakened, never forgave. This cold was not the winter you know today. It was a brutal abyss of temperature where the very air sliced into lungs like shards of glass, where water hardened to stone and rivers froze into glittering prisons, where each breath stole warmth you could never regain. To step unprepared into that void was to invite death, not within hours, but within minutes, and many did, because one mistake in the Ice Age was all it took. Fire could keep you alive, yes, but fire could also betray you. A sudden storm could snuff it out, wind could scatter embers into darkness, snow could bury kindling, and the tribe that failed to guard its flame faced a night longer than eternity. I could tell you about one clan that lost their fire during a blizzard and made a desperate choice that history has all but buried. But that truth, trust me, I'll reveal later. Food was salvation against the cold, because hunger hollowed bones, stripped away energy, and left the body too weak to resist frostbite creeping up the skin. And frostbite was merciless. It blackened fingers, numbed toes, and stole limbs piece by piece until a hunter could no longer walk, no longer hunt, no longer survive. The snow did not simply fall, it devoured. Blizzards could erase the land itself, burying valleys, shifting rivers, and covering entire herds in white tombs. The silence after a storm was even more terrifying than the storm itself, because it left behind a blank world, featureless and cruel, where direction vanished and travelers wandered in circles until exhaustion dragged them into the drifts. Some archaeologists whisper of bodies found frozen mid-stride, faces locked in expressions of confusion, as if the snow had swallowed them whole, while they searched for a horizon that never appeared. And yet, it wasn't just the storms. It was the cold's ability to get inside the mind. Isolation in an endless white desert could drive men into madness. Hours blurred into days, the sun hidden behind grey skies, the brain slipping into hallucinations, hearing voices in the wind, seeing figures that weren't there. Some believed spirits walked the snow, watching, whispering, leading wanderers away from safety. I won't tell you now what one shaman claimed he saw out there. That revelation I'll save for later. But those visions shaped myths that carried through generations. Still, the most chilling truth of the cold was this: it never killed alone. Hunger made you weaker. Fatigue made you slower. Predators waited for your mistakes. And the cold tied it all together into one merciless trap. You could survive the saber-tooth. You could escape the cave bear. You could fight off rival tribes. But against the cold, there was no victory, only delay. Every sunrise was borrowed, every fire was temporary, and every step across the tundra was another gamble against a killer you could not see or hear. And yet, here's the most haunting part. The cold did not just take lives, it preserved them. Bodies froze where they fell, flesh sealed in ice for thousands of years, faces staring out as if death had come only yesterday. The Ice Age buried its secrets, but it also kept them, locked beneath glaciers and snowfields, waiting to be uncovered. And one day, much later, humanity would unearth those frozen witnesses and realize just how narrow the line between survival and extinction had been. For now, remember this. In the Ice Age, the cold was more than a season. It was an executioner without a face, and one mistake before its gaze was enough to ensure you never saw the dawn again. The Ice Age tested humanity with predators, hunger, storms, and endless cold, but the cruelest enemy of all was the reflection staring back at them, man himself. When the world froze and resources vanished, survival was no longer about mammoths or lions. It was about the tribe across the valley, the neighbors who once shared a fire, the friends who became threats the moment food ran out. Stone blades and sharpened spears, once forged for hunting colossal beasts, began to drip with human blood, and the frozen lands echoed with cries, not from animals, but from men, women, and children betrayed by their own kind. Hunger stripped away humanity's softness, exposing a savagery more terrifying than any saber-tooth, because a predator hunts by instinct, but man hunts with calculation. Entire villages were ambushed in the silence of night, fires extinguished, shelters torn apart, survivors dragged screaming into the snow. Archaeologists have uncovered sites where skeletons lie with fractured skulls, ribs punctured by stone points, and yet tools, ornaments, and fire pits remained untouched, proving these were not attacks for wealth or glory. These were massacres for survival. And yet I will hold back the most chilling discovery, one that rewrites what we think of Ice Age morality, that I'll reveal later because its shadow is too heavy to drop just now. But betrayal was not always external. Sometimes the enemy was inside the very circle of fire. Fathers chose their own survival over starving children. Brothers clutched spears tighter than bonds of loyalty. Whole clans splintered into fragments, each stealing from the other, each night filled with the dread that a familiar face might become the last you see. And when food ran dry, when no mammoth wandered close and no bison crossed the plain, whispers rose in the firelight. Whispers of flesh not from the hunt, but from kin. Cannibalism, though many hesitate to speak it, was no rumor. It was carved into the bones left behind. Marks of cutting, burning, and splitting tell the truth that hunger can twist love into horror. Some fires did not roast mammoth haunches, but human remains, and some shelters carried the smell of death disguised as survival. I will not describe yet the most infamous site where this was uncovered, because that revelation belongs to a darker moment still to come. But hold this. The Ice Age forced man to consume more than meat. It forced him to consume his own soul. And still, as bleak as it was, conflict bred something no predator could teach: strategy. Humans learned to ambush rival groups as they did mammoths, using terrain, deception, and timing. They invented traps, not just for animals, but for humans. Pits dug beneath snow, deadfalls hidden under branches, lures and decoys that could pull rival hunters into an early grave. War did not emerge in some grand battlefield of later civilizations. It was born here, in the ice, where survival and betrayal danced together. And though these conflicts were drenched in horror, they forged a sharper mind, a colder heart, and a ruthless determination that gave humanity an edge even against nature's greatest killers. But the price? Trust became a rare currency, worth more than fire, more than food, more than life itself. One mistake, a misplaced word, an ember seen from too far, a hand extended in peace that should have held a weapon, was enough to turn survival into slaughter. And so in the end, the deadliest predator of the Ice Age was not saber-tooth or cave bear, not the storm or the frost. It was man, stripped of mercy by desperation. Remember this. Nature taught humans fear, but man taught himself cruelty, and that cruelty was often the only reason one tribe saw another sunrise. The Ice Age was a crucible, a test so merciless that most species that walked into its frozen arena never walked out again, and humanity stood on the razor's edge of that same fate, one mistake away from being just another set of bones buried in the permafrost. The mammoth herds thinned, the saber-tooths vanished into history, the giant sloths and towering beasts disappeared forever. But man endured. And the question, the haunting question, is why? What allowed fragile, half-naked humans with brittle bones and small tribes to outlast titans of fur, tooth, and muscle? The answer is not simple, and I will not give it to you all at once, because it is tangled in firelight, in betrayal, in courage, in cruelty, in desperation, and in something so rare it almost feels like chance. But here's the truth you need to hold. Survival was not just about strength, it was about adaptation. And adaptation came at a cost that scarred the human spirit forever. Fire was mastered, tools sharpened, language whispered in the cold to coordinate hunts with precision no predator could match. And for the first time, stories were shared not just to comfort but to teach. warnings passed down so no one repeated the fatal mistakes of those who vanished. But don't think it was an easy climb. Entire tribes disappeared overnight, swallowed by storms, stalked by predators, or worse, betrayed by their own. Yet even in this chaos, humanity carved something new, cooperation beyond bloodlines. Small groups joined forces, alliances born not of love but of necessity, because the Ice Age taught that no one survived alone. And from those fragile alliances grew networks, and from networks grew culture, and from culture grew the spark of civilization. Still, the path was drenched in blood. Conflict between humans did not vanish. It escalated because every tribe that survived learned the same lesson. Resources were everything. Wood for fire, bones for tools, hides for warmth, fat for light, and above all, meat. Wars for resources shaped early humans into strategists, turning survival into a game of territory, ambush, and dominance. Yet alongside cruelty, something extraordinary happened. Art emerged. In caves where bears once ruled, humans painted walls with animals they revered and feared, recording hunts, storms, and visions. Why? Was it a way to teach? A way to remember? Or perhaps a way to control fear itself, to make the terror of the Ice Age bearable by capturing it in images? I won't tell you my answer yet, because the significance of that art holds a secret I'll reveal only later. But know this. It was more than decoration. It was survival of the mind. While predators stalked the body, the greatest threat was despair, and art became a shield against madness. And yet, for all the advances, for all the cunning and resilience, the Ice Age still pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. Genetic evidence suggests our population dwindled to numbers so small, so fragile, that a single disaster could have ended us forever. The Earth itself seemed ready to erase us, but somehow, against every odd, we endured. Was it intelligence? Was it luck? Or was it the cruelty that allowed us to sacrifice others so a few could continue? That's the question I'll let linger, because it has no easy answer. What is certain is that survival demanded more than muscle, more than fire, more than tools. It demanded the transformation of humanity itself. Those who walked out of the Ice Age were not the same as those who entered. They were colder, harder, sharper. They had learned to mistrust, to calculate, to innovate, and to carry memory forward in ways no beast could. And so, when the ice began to retreat and the world warmed, humans stepped out, not as prey, not as fragile wanderers, but as survivors who had inherited the earth by enduring the unendurable. But remember this, it was never guaranteed. A single mistake, one misstep in those endless centuries of frozen trial, and you would not be hearing this story because there would be no story to tell. Humanity itself balanced on the knife's edge of annihilation, and its escape was as narrow as the line of firelight that stood between warmth and death.